Good morning. Today I'm going to briefly try and explain how it is that fish would have evolved and eventually made their way onto land. Now there's lots and lots of evidence that supports this. The fossil record supports this. Genetics supports this. Really, every time we try and investigate this with a new technique, the evidence all supports this. So we have an image here that shows a slow transition from what we think of as fish, slowly developing limbs, and then eventually being completely land-based with limbs. And there are thousands of fossils that allow us to trace the evolution of limbs as fish slowly moved onto land. So what's the brief explanation of how this happened? I mean, this could take hours to explain, but I'm just giving you a quick rundown of how this happened. 400 million years ago, was the time of the Devonian period, okay? And this is how Earth looked like. $400 million years ago. During the Devonian period. And you see there's a lot of shallow areas here. There's a lot of parts of the ocean that are very shallow. The land is all kind of clumped together. So even though the ocean was huge, the area around the land was quite shallow, and there was a whole bunch of marshes and swamps. It was very, very common. So instead of these thick forests that we're used to of pine trees and conifers like redwoods, we didn't have those trees. And most of the vegetation, because it was hot also during that time, it was all swampland. Lots of shallow waters and swamps / marshes. Now the seas were teeming with life. There was all kinds of creatures in the ocean. One of them was this super predator, and there was lots of predators, Dunkleosteus. And you can see it compared to the size of a person. This thing was huge. So there was lots of reasons to try and get away from the open waters. It was most of the life that we think of as complex life would have been in the ocean at this time. There wasn't much on land other than plants and insects. So it made sense, and things survived that were able to avoid all these different types of predators in the ocean. So there were some creatures that survived and reproduced because they could live in the shallow waters where these super predators couldn't get to. And they became evolved for life in these shallow waters over time. One of those features that allowed them to be successful in these shallow waters was these fins that they had that started to stiffen up. They started to be able to support their body, and these fins could be used to help them swim through shallow water. So even if it's only half a foot here, this creature is still swimming, but it's using these stiff limbs to help kind of guide it through these shallow waters. And there's lots of fish that are alive today that have similar features. So it's living in shallow waters, it's staying away from the predators, but it's still a completely aquatic lifestyle. It lives in the water, it lives in the water, it reproduces in the water, it gets its food from the water. It's just very shallow water. But what happens is, as this thing is living in these shallow waters, insects are starting to really take over the land and swamps. And for the first time, there is food that's up on the land. There hadn't been food on the land before that. So before the insects, there wasn't anything that was going to be eaten by fish that lived in the sea. But now all these insects are a good source of food for creatures that are close to that land. And on top of it, there's no predators up there. So slowly, again, this is very slowly, these creatures that live in the water start to be able to move up onto land for short periods, getting food, avoiding predators. And then over millions of years, they're able to reproduce on land. They're still required to be near water, but they can live right next to the water, reproduce on the land, and their offspring are less likely to be eaten by all the predators that are in the water. So there's many advantages to slowly making this transition. Okay, I hope this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.